The reality is that a vast number of men carry a quiet, heavy burden of inadequacy that they rarely, if ever, discuss out loud. You might find yourself in a private moment of reflection, looking in the mirror or lying awake at night, wondering if you are enough or if your partner is secretly disappointed. This isn't just a fleeting thought. For many, it is a persistent background noise that suggests women are constantly evaluating them against an invisible ruler. This deep-seated anxiety has been passed down through generations of men, creating a cycle of self-doubt that affects everything from self-esteem to how you show up in the bedroom. The weight of this concern is especially heavy for men over 50. After decades of absorbing societal messages, it's easy to believe that your worth is tied to a specific physical standard. In my years of professional experience speaking with men in this age group, I've seen how this size myth creates a massive amount of unnecessary stress, often leading to performance anxiety or a withdrawal from intimacy altogether. It is heartbreaking because so much of this mental suffering is based on misinformation rather than medical reality. It is time to move past the outdated locker room talk and the exaggerated jokes that shaped your perspective when you were younger. Those old stories don't account for the actual science of the human body or the reality of what creates a fulfilling sexual connection. By looking at the facts calmly and honestly, we can strip away the myths that have caused so much silent worry. Understanding the truth about how aging and anatomy actually work is the first step toward reclaiming your confidence and realizing that satisfaction has very little to do with the numbers you've been taught to fear. Think back for a moment and try to pinpoint exactly when you first started believing that size was something you needed to worry about. For the vast majority of men, this insecurity didn't start with a doctor's visit or a mature, loving conversation with a partner. Instead, it likely took root during the vulnerable years of adolescence, in the middle of locker room banter, crude jokes, or the first time you saw an exaggerated, unrealistic image in the media. These early moments create a blueprint in the mind, a standard that we start measuring ourselves against long before we even understand how real adult intimacy works. Because these impressions happen so young, they tend to stick with us for decades, acting like a quiet, critical voice in the back of our heads. As you get older, these doubts don't just disappear. In fact, they often find new ways to surface. When you reach your 50s and beyond, your body naturally begins to change. You might notice shifts in your stamina, the time it takes to achieve an erection, or how your body responds to touch. The danger here is that many men take these normal, age-related biological changes and mistakenly interpret them as proof that they were never enough to begin with. You might find yourself spiraling into thoughts of personal failure, wondering if aging has taken away the very thing that made you a man. This internal narrative can quietly eat away at your self-esteem and your desire to be close to your partner. It is incredibly important to realize that you are not alone in this feeling. Anxiety about physical measurements is one of the most frequently reported sexual concerns for men across every culture and age group. However, there is a massive documented gap between what men perceive to be true and what is actually happening in reality. Most men are living with a distorted mental map of what a normal body looks like, fueled by decades of comparison to extremes. By understanding that your worry likely started with a locker room joke rather than a medical fact, you can begin to see that this burden isn't something your body created. It's something you were taught to carry. When we step away from the myths and look at the hard data, the results are often a massive relief for most men. Large-scale clinical studies, where doctors have carefully and objectively measured thousands of men from all over the world, consistently show that the average erect length falls between 5 and 5.5 inches. It is crucial to understand that this number represents the middle of the curve. It is the standard average, not a passing grade or a bare minimum requirement. In reality, the vast majority of the male population sits right within or very close to this range. If you fall anywhere near these numbers, you are completely normal. Yet many men spend their lives feeling like they are coming up short because they don't understand what average actually looks like. The reason so many men feel inadequate is because of a massive perception problem. We live in a world where we are constantly exposed to extreme representations of the male body, particularly in adult entertainment. It is important to remember that these images are specifically curated and designed to be unrealistic. They use selective casting of outliers, specific camera angles, and lighting tricks to create a visual that doesn't reflect the general public. When you use those fictional images as your benchmark, your own healthy, functional body can start to look like a problem in your mind. You aren't actually comparing yourself to other men. You are comparing yourself to a specialized performance standard that doesn't exist in the everyday world. If you have been carrying a sense of shame or worry about your size, take a moment to be honest with yourself about where your standards came from. Have you been judging your worth based on actual medical data and the real-life experiences of average people, or have you been measuring yourself against a fictional standard designed for a screen? Most anxiety in this area comes from this very mistake, treating the extreme as if it were the norm. By realigning your expectations with the scientific reality that 5 to 5.5 inches is the standard, you can begin to let go of the pressure and realize that your body is exactly where it needs to be. When women are given the chance to share their honest preferences anonymously, without any social pressure or the fear of hurting a partner's feelings, the results are consistently a major reality check for men. While many men are convinced that women are holding out for an extreme or heroic standard, the data shows that the vast majority of women prefer sizes that are very close to the natural average. In study after study, women report that they are perfectly satisfied with, and often prefer, men who fall into that 5 to 5.5 inch range. The idea that a woman requires extreme dimensions to be happy is simply not supported by the evidence. For most women, a partner who is average is exactly what they are looking for. In fact, the bigger is better mindset often ignores a very practical reality. Excessive size can actually be a drawback. For many women, extreme length or girth can cause physical discomfort, bruising, or even sharp pain during intimacy. This becomes even more relevant as couples age. Over time, a woman's body undergoes natural hormonal changes that can affect tissue elasticity and natural lubrication. In these stages of life, comfort becomes the highest priority. If a partner is too large, it can turn a moment of connection into a moment of physical endurance or distress. When intimacy causes pain, it's impossible for a woman to relax and enjoy the experience, which is the exact opposite of what most men are trying to achieve. The real problem is that men often project their own insecurities and male-centered myths onto the female experience. Because men are taught from a young age to value size as a badge of power or masculinity, they assume women must view it the same way. But women rarely define their satisfaction by a measurement. They are looking for a shared experience, not a physical spectacle. By clinging to the bigger is better myth, you might be worrying about a feature that your partner actually views as a potential source of discomfort. Shifting your focus away from the myth and toward your partner's actual comfort and pleasure is the most effective way to build true confidence and a deeper connection. When we look at the actual biology of the female body, the idea that depth is the key to pleasure completely falls apart. Scientifically speaking, the vaginal canal is not a deep, sensation-filled tunnel that requires a specific length to reach a finish line. In reality, the vast majority of the nerve endings responsible for sexual pleasure are concentrated in the outer third of the canal. This means that from a purely biological standpoint, extreme depth is not a requirement for physical satisfaction. Most of the sensation happens near the entrance, where the most sensitive tissues are located. Because of this, a man's focus on reaching deeper is often a distraction from the areas that actually produce the most enjoyment for his partner. True physical satisfaction is driven by a woman's internal environment, specifically her levels of arousal, relaxation, and emotional safety. When a woman feels completely safe, respected, and heard, her nervous system allows her body to relax. This relaxation triggers increased blood flow to the pelvic region, making the tissues more sensitive and responsive to touch. In this state, the body is primed for pleasure. If that emotional foundation is missing, or if she feels rushed or pressured, no amount of physical measurement can make up for it. Pleasure is a biological response to comfort, not a mathematical result of inches or depth. On the flip side, the anxiety a man feels about his own size can actually become the biggest biological roadblock to a good experience. When you are stuck in your head worrying about your performance or your body, your brain perceives that worry as a form of threat. This triggers the release of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, which are the enemies of intimacy. These hormones cause blood vessels to constrict, which directly interferes with your ability to maintain a strong erection and can kill your natural stamina. By worrying that you aren't enough, you inadvertently create a physical reaction that makes intimacy harder. Breaking this cycle starts with realizing that your presence and your partner's comfort are far more powerful than any anatomical myth. For men over 50, it is time to fundamentally shift how you view your role in the bedroom. For too long, society has taught men to see intimacy as a high-stakes performance, where they are the lead athlete and their body is a machine that must work perfectly every time. This mindset creates an enormous amount of pressure, making you feel like you have to win or prove something. However, as you age, the metric for success has to change. It is completely normal for your body to behave differently than it did at 20. Erections may take a bit longer to develop, or you might notice a shift in sensitivity. These are not red flags or signs of failure. They are simply the natural biological signs of a body that is maturing. Understanding this allows you to stop fighting against time and start working with the body you have today. The good news is that what partners actually value as they get older aligns perfectly with this shift. Research consistently shows that women, particularly those in long-term relationships, place a much higher premium on consistency, attentiveness, and emotional connection than they do on physical novelty or marathon performances. They aren't looking for a spectacle. They are looking for a partner who is truly present. When you stop obsessing over your physical stats, you free up the mental energy to focus on the things that actually build desire: a soft touch, a listening ear, and the ability to make your partner feel safe and seen. This emotional intelligence is a far more powerful aphrodisiac than any physical attribute you might be worried about. Ultimately, we need to redefine what it means to be a masculine man in the second half of life. True masculinity is not defined by the rigidity of an erection or a specific measurement on a ruler. Those are fleeting physical traits that have nothing to do with who you are as a person. Real masculinity is found in your character, your reliability, and your ability to engage emotionally with the person you love. When you make the choice to prioritize connection over performance, you remove the heavy burden of proving yourself. This shift is incredibly liberating. It allows intimacy to become a shared experience of joy and comfort rather than a test you're afraid of failing. If you want to boost your confidence and improve your physical response, the most effective tool isn't a ruler, it is your lifestyle. Real improvement starts with your cardiovascular health because, from a medical perspective, an erection is purely a blood flow event. Anything that is good for your heart is good for your sexual health. Simple habits like daily walking, light strength training, and managing your blood pressure do more to improve erection quality and firmness than any enhancement product ever could. When you strengthen your heart and clear your arteries through movement, you are quite literally upgrading the plumbing that makes intimacy possible. Beyond physical movement, you must look at your internal environment, specifically your sleep and stress levels. Sleep is the foundation of your hormonal health. It is the time when your body naturally produces testosterone and repairs the nervous system. If you are chronically sleep deprived, your body stays in a state of exhaustion that makes desire and response nearly impossible. Similarly, chronic stress acts like a biological off switch for intimacy. When your mind is racing with worry or work stress, your nervous system stays in survival mode, which diverts blood flow away from the very areas you want it to go. Finding ways to lower your daily stress and prioritizing 7 to 8 hours of rest isn't just about feeling better. It's about giving your body the biological resources it needs to function correctly. Finally, the most underrated performance booster is simple, honest communication. It is a surprising reality that many couples go years without ever actually talking about what feels good or what they need. One calm conversation where you share your needs and listen to your partners can do more for your sex life than 5 extra inches of length ever would. This goes hand in hand with ditching the comparisons you see in adult media. You have to remember that those videos are highly choreographed productions that rely on selective casting, specific camera angles, and professional editing. They are designed to be a spectacle, not an educational manual for real-life relationships. When you stop comparing your real life to a digital fantasy and start talking to the real person in front of you, the pressure vanishes and true satisfaction begins. Take a moment to ask yourself a very honest, gentle question. If you had grown up in a world where no one ever talked about size and no one ever told you that it was a measure of your worth, how would you feel about your body today? Most of the anxiety you carry isn't something you were born with. It is a learned behavior picked up from locker rooms, media, and cultural myths. The good news is that anything learned can be unlearned. When you realize that the rule book you've been following was written by people who didn't have your best interests at heart, you can finally give yourself permission to let that weight go. You are far more normal than you have been led to believe, and your value as a partner and as a man has absolutely nothing to do with a number on a ruler. True confidence doesn't come from a specific measurement. It comes from how you inhabit your own skin. It is built on qualities that actually deepen with age, such as being present in the moment, showing genuine kindness, and remaining curious about your partner. When you stop monitoring yourself like a judge and start engaging like a partner, the entire experience changes. You deserve to feel comfortable and at peace with your body at every stage of your life. There is a profound freedom in realizing that you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You are already enough exactly as you are. Interestingly, once that heavy blanket of anxiety fades away, your body often begins to respond much more naturally. When the mind is calm and the pressure to perform is removed, the biological systems responsible for intimacy can finally do their job without interference. By choosing to focus on connection rather than a physical standard, you aren't just improving your sex life, you're improving your overall well-being. Take a deep breath and accept the reality that satisfaction is a shared emotional journey. It is something you create with another person through care and trust, and that is something no measurement could ever capture.